As the night went on, the man filled that small home with one story after another. Stories of adventure, combat, and the friends that he made along the way, all with an upbeat and jovial attitude about it, seeming not to have a care in the world. While Melody was still not fond of him, even she began to crack every now and again, as she couldn't help but find a small smile peeking out from under her scowl, or catch herself starting to chuckle at one of his humorous little stories. But eventually, Melody told her son Talion that it was time for bed, and so they all did their best to settle in for a night's rest. And just as promised, early in the morning the next day, Talion and his new teacher made their way out to that clearing in the woods to begin their training. As they finally made it out to the designated spot, Talion stood overjoyed, wondering exactly how this training was going to work, wondering what new abilities he might learn. Okay, kid, today it's your first day of training. Congratulations, you have just started on the path to being a warrior, and I hope you can stick with it. However, this first day is gonna be a roughie, primarily because, you've got some things that I need to, beat out of you. You've spent a lot of time in this world, surrounded with humans and kindness from your mother, which are all good things. I'm not saying they're bad. But when dealing with combat, you need to know your enemy, to understand them and be able to, in a sense, deal with their strength. All of their strengths. It's a dangerous game by anyone's standards, and not for the faint of heart. The reason that you being raised in this environment is a bit of a problem is because that you don't know demons. You don't understand them, how they work. You've had no exposure to their abilities, techniques, personalities. If you were raised in the demon world, it wouldn't be an issue. You'd understand it, be comfortable with it. But you haven't been. You've been stuck out here in the woods with your mother your whole life. So the first thing we need to do is get you acquainted with the nature of demons and the threats you're going to face. One of the most dangerous of which is fear. Fear has always been a powerful weapon, and it's one that those of the demon world specifically are incredibly adept at wielding. There are countless enemies within the demon world who will rely on fear as a weapon against you. They'll get into your head, set up shop there, make themselves comfortable, and read you like a book, all so they can instill you with fear. Fear is such a cornucopia word. There are so many flavors of fear that it's hard to keep track of them all. Fear of death, fear of captivity, fear of failure, fear of pain, fear of loss, even fear of the truth. There are countless varieties of fear, any of which your enemies can use against you, and they will. Demons are especially good at it. So before anything else, before you learn to fight or control your power, you need to have some experience in dealing with fear, so that when a real enemy confronts you with fear, you can face it. So, today, I'm not gonna put it gently. I'm gonna scare the crap out of you. I'm gonna stitch fear into your bones. Basically, I'm gonna hunt you like a rabid animal. Your goal for today? Survive. As long as you can. Don't bother attacking or defending. It won't help you. Trying to use technique or strength won't matter. I'm far above you in those categories. The only thing you need to focus on is, staying alive. And you're going to do that by running. Run as much as you can. Try to escape me. Keep away from me at all costs. And whatever you do, do not succumb to the fear. As he spoke the words, Talion began to feel a shiver crawl up his spine. He thought today was going to be fun. He was actually excited about it. But by the impressions that his new teacher was giving him, today was going to be anything but. Don't worry, kid. I'm not actually going to kill you. That would be beside the point. But I'm not gonna lie. I am gonna have to hurt you. If you're not smart, maybe pretty bad. Pain is another fear that you're going to have to learn to deal with. Compartmentalization, kid. You're gonna have to get good at it. Your enemies will try to convince you that they're untouchable, that their power is so much vaster than yours that you don't have a foggy chance in hell of beating them. That's crap. There's no such thing as unbeatable, just arrogant. But in order to beat them, in order to win, you're going to have to surmount the fear. Today's lesson is your first lesson in trying to do that, to surmount the fear and survive. So I'm going to come at you. I'm going to attack you again and again. And your only job is to survive it. To run if you can. Dodge when you can. Do whatever you can to make it through. And remember not to give up. Don't let the fear win. You have strength in your blood. Use it. You have powerful instincts. Rely on them. Do whatever you must to make it. And that is all there really is to today's training. So, you might want to brace yourself, he said, as steam, fog began to billow out from every direction around his form in an explosive wave, rushing out, filling the air around him. Talion felt forced back, taking a few steps back as the wind rushed past, whipping his hair and clothing. He could feel heat emanating, flowing out from where his teacher stood, as the wind just kept rushing for what seemed like forever. But finally, it died down, beginning to slow. Talion was covering his face and eyes, worried about the intense wind and warmth coming from where his teacher stood. But as he looked back up, he wasn't there anymore. He had simply disappeared, like he'd evaporated into this fog that now surrounded him. As Talion looked around, he couldn't see anything. He couldn't see more than a few feet away from him. This fog was so thick. It was like being inside of a cloud, so dense it blotted out everything, even the light from the sun. He couldn't even tell where the sun was as he looked up into the sky. The only thing he could see was a few feet in front of him, around him in every direction. Feel the grass under his feet, and an occasional shifting breeze. It seemed to differ from the regular winds around his home. It was as if he was changing the wind itself, as if that too no longer obeyed the regular rules, shifting from one direction to the next. As Talion began to try to get a bearing of himself, wondering what exactly he was supposed to do, where his teacher was. A short distance away, he began to hear a noise, like a bubbling or a churning. As he looked over to it, he began to see a black sludge beginning to curdle out of the ground, pouring out of the earth itself, forming a massive puddle of black slime that bubbled and churned in place, growing ever the larger with every passing second, until a form began to rise from it. Some kind of horrifying creature, long gangly arms, covered in black sludge and slime, with razor-sharp claws at the end. A head that looked like a skull, but it didn't have eyes in it. Just beads of red light that seemed to peer out at him. From its back, long, slick tendrils dripping with black ooze and slime, steam rising off of its form as it crawled its way out of this pit of sludge. As the skull began to take more shape, razor-sharp teeth filled its skeletal mouth, still pure black, dripping that ooze from everywhere. Steam poured out of its mouth as it opened its gaping maw, more black sludge pouring out, dripping onto the ground as a long, spindly tongue strung from its mouth, whirling around like it was trying to taste the air. And in that moment, it let out a screech, like the sound of metal grinding against metal, a high-pitched whine that made his ears hurt. He actually tried covering them, but it barely helped at all. As he stood there, looking at this horrifying monstrosity crawling from the ooze, it suddenly took off, down on all fours, charging towards Talion, screeching, whipping its tendrils, digging those claws into the ground, ripping up chunks of earth and grass as it moved rapidly towards him. Talion was completely terrified. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to move, he wanted to run, but his legs, all they did was shake in place.